So it's Thanksgiving Day, you've roasted your turkey, you've eaten it with the stuffing and the mashed potatoes and the cranberries and whatnot, and now you're looking at this big old turkey carcass and you're thinking, we should make soup. Well, you've come to the right place because today I've got the most outstanding and extremely simple leftover turkey carcass soup recipe to share with you. You've already done the hard part. You've made the turkey and you've carved the turkey. Now, all you really need to do is take those bones and the rest of that carcass and make some amazing turkey stock, and then use that turkey stock to make a wonderful turkey noodle soup. So we're gonna get right into it and go through every step, but I'm telling you, it's super easy and super delicious. And of course, the very first thing we have to do is roast a turkey. Do this however you normally do it. Use whatever recipe and technique you like. Just get that turkey roasted like you would for any Thanksgiving. And then carve it up just like you ordinarily would. And whether you do it before Thanksgiving dinner or later on, do your best to remove basically all of the meat off of all of the bones. Because not only do we need that carcass and those bones to make our soup stock, but we also need a bit of that meat, which will also be going into the final soup. So I'll just get this thing carved up. I got my breast meat and my thighs, and those are kind of the presentation pieces. Those are the pieces that people want on their plate during the Thanksgiving dinner. But if you know you're gonna be making turkey soup later, it's the perfect opportunity to use the meat that's on those wings and even the turkey legs if you don't ordinarily serve those with dinner. You can really get in there and pull off all the little odds and ends and bits of meat that might not otherwise really be a nice slice to serve at dinner time. So I'm just gonna go through and make a couple of different piles. I've got my quote presentation slices, and then I've got kind of everything else divided into white and dark. And for those odd bits of meat that I've set aside for the soup, I'll just give them all a rough chop into some bite-sized pieces. And it doesn't really matter if you use white meat or dark meat for your soup. I like a nice mix because why not? I need somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 4 cups of that chopped up meat. So I'll just fill up a 4-quart deli container as I go. And once I've got it packed nice and full, I'll throw a lid on it and into the fridge it goes until tomorrow when I'm actually gonna make this stock and the soup. Okay, it's the next day and we're gonna start making our turkey soup stock. And it's incredibly simple. But of course, we will start with a little bit of prep work that needs to be done. First, we need to roughly chop up 1 large yellow or white onion. Nothing too particular here. I'll just cut this thing in half and then chop it into a few big chunks. Next, we've got 3 carrots. Well, let's go 4 because these are kind of small. And all I'm doing is chopping off the stem end and cutting each carrot into, 3 or 4 pieces. No need to peel them, just make sure they're good and clean. Then we'll do the same with 3 celery ribs. I will trim just a little off the end because that end always looks a little dirty to me. And of course the root end, we can chop a little bit of that off because again, it's always stained with kind of a dirty look that I just don't really want in my food. And again, just chop these ribs up 2 or 3 times. And we'll need about, let's say, 3 or 4 parsley sprigs, and sometimes it's hard to determine what the heck is actually a sprig out of these things, but you really can't screw it up when you're making stock for a soup like this. Just get some different herbs and vegetables in there, along with your meat bones, and it's gonna work out well. Something like that's gonna work just fine. And we've got a couple of big old bay leaves that we'll be throwing in there. Some fresh sage, I guess you might call this 3 sprigs or about 10 leaves. I usually just count the leaves and use 10 to 12 of those. Gotta have a little bit of sage in a good turkey soup. And we've also got some fresh thyme coming, but I prefer to save that for the soup itself because if you go too heavy on the thyme, it tends to overpower other flavors a little too much. So our prep work is done, and now we can move over to the stove and start building our stock. So I've got out the biggest soup pot that I own, and I just need to get my turkey carcass in there along with all of them bones from the legs and the wings and, well, everything. And if your pot simply won't fit this whole carcass in there, well, you can of course chop that carcass up any which way you need, break it, hit it with a meat cleaver, run it over with your car if you have to. Just get it in that pot and get it down in there the best you can. Now to just add all of our other stock ingredients, the onions, carrots, celery, parsley, sage, and bay leaves. And we'll add in about a teaspoon of whole black peppercorns and a big old pinch of kosher salt. Let's call that 1 tablespoon. Now we just need to add some cold water, basically enough to cover everything in the pot by about 1 inch or 2. This is gonna be a lot of stock, so we're gonna need a lot of water. All in, this is gonna be like almost 2 gallons of water, and that's perfectly fine. Of course, that all depends on the size of your turkey carcass and the size of your pot and everything else. Don't just blindly throw in 2 gallons, just figure out where it's about 1 inch or so above the top level of that carcass and most of the other solids in there. Now we're getting the heat turned on to high, and we need to let this whole thing come up to a boil. And once everything has come up to a boil, we will reduce the temperature of the stove to pretty low, because now we just want to let this all cook away at a pretty low simmer for the next 3 hours. And we're going to leave the pot uncovered. That's going to let the whole thing reduce a bit, concentrate those flavors, and as it simmers away, if any sort of scum or foam forms on top, we'll just skim that off with a spoon, get it out of there. It may or may not happen. It just all depends on the level of impurities in that carcass and so forth. But anyway, we'll fast forward a little while until we're ready to move on with this turkey stock. And while that stock is simmering away, it gives us plenty of time to knock out the vegetable prep for the soup itself that we still have to make. So, starting with another pretty good sized yellow onion, white would also work, we're just gonna get this thing diced up. Nothing too crazy, just a pretty standard chop. Next, 3 more carrots, and this time we are going to peel them. And you can pretty much chop these any which way you want. Some people just do slices all the way down. I don't tend to like great big slices that you get from the fat ends of these carrots, so I usually just kind of wing it, do a couple of slices before ultimately cutting the whole thing down the middle. We get a few slices from the halved piece, but as it gets thicker down, I'll cut that in half one more time. And now I've got some little 1/4 round pieces. There's really no right or wrong way to do it when it comes to chopping the carrots and the celery and the onion. Just get them broken down until they look about like the size of a piece that you'd want on your spoon. And of course, some more celery. Same deal. Trim off the ends. These are pretty decent sized celeries, so I'll slice it down the middle and then just get to slicing. And you know, we need a few cloves of garlic in here. I don't know, something like 3 or 4 cloves, about what will equate to somewhere around a teaspoon of minced garlic. Now we're bringing back that parsley, and we need to chop some up. What we're looking for is about 1/3 of a cup of some finely chopped or just about minced parsley. Last up, a couple more herbs. We've got some fresh thyme, and we've got a little more sage. And I do love thyme, but I sure hate picking the leaves off of thyme. But that's what you gotta do, and we only need about a teaspoon of it, so I guess it's not that bad. And we'll just give this thyme a little bit of a chop just to make sure all them little leaves are separated. Break them down just a little bit more. Really don't need a lot because thyme is pretty strong in flavor, and a little goes a long way. Last up is our sage. We just need a few of these little leaves here. Well, let's call that about 6 leaves, and we'll just give it a little chop. That's looking pretty good to me, so that means that our vegetable prep is done. And now we just gotta wait for that stock to finish simmering so we can move on and start making this actual turkey soup. All right, it's been, well, a little over 3 hours of simmering because, well, I kind of lost track of time. maybe about 3.5 hours. It's completely okay. It's not going to hurt anything. It just means that our stock has reduced a little bit more, but we're still going to have plenty to work with, and that just means it's going to be even more flavorful. So now what we need to do is basically separate everything liquid from everything solid. And I'll do that by first using some tongs and just fishing out all the bigger pieces of whatever I can grab out of there. Most of it's going to be bone and cartilage and things. There's still a bit of meat on here, and I could go through and pick a lot of that out and use it again, and I might if there's any bigger chunks. But we're just trying to get everything out of there, all those veggies. I got a bay leaf in here. Once I get the main parts of the bone and rib cage and the carcass and all that out of there, I can get my spider web spoon thing out. I think that's what these are called. And just get in there, start pulling some more of the pieces out. Most of them are now a little smaller. All that veg. Looks like I had a leg bone in there. We've extracted all the flavor that there is to extract out of these bones and the vegetables and all that, so we simply don't need them anymore. Now, with the help of a fine mesh metal strainer and a rubber band, I'm going to secure this thing to just a little saucepan or whatever vessel I think will be just big enough to hold the liquid that I'm about to pour into it, which will be our stock. Yeah, I probably should have used one of my bigger strainers, but this is going to work just fine. And we just want to carefully pour everything through so we can strain out our delicious stock. And I pretty much couldn't have cut that any closer. I don't know why I thought this was the right pan to use. I should have used a small stock pot, but whatever. It was just big enough to hold all of our stock. We'll let all these little bits of things sit in the strainer, get those out of there. And what we have left is some of the most flavorful homemade turkey stock you've ever seen. So I'm gonna set that aside for just a little bit while we get back over to the stove and start actually making this turkey soup. So we've got a, I guess, medium-sized stock pot. I'm gonna get that over medium-high heat and throw in some olive oil, just about enough to cover the bottom of this pot. And yeah, you could use butter instead if you prefer. I think olive oil works great. And now we're gonna start throwing in our vegetables to start sauteing them down a bit. We got that yellow onion, the carrot, and the celery. I'll just let those cook down for maybe about 5 minutes until they're just starting to get a little softened. Then I'll throw in that minced up garlic, cook it about another minute. All right, now from here, the rest of this soup comes together pretty fast. First, we're adding in 8 cups of that turkey stock. Along with 1 teaspoon of black ground pepper and 1.5 teaspoons of seasoned salt. And yeah, you could just use some regular salt, but I really think that something like a Lowry's seasoned salt works incredibly well with the flavor profile of, well, chicken or turkey soup. I'll get that all stirred in, and now we just have to let this come back up to a very low boil. And now we're adding in all of the remaining ingredients. All of our herbs, that's the thyme, the sage, and the parsley. Get that stirred in just a little bit. Now for all of that cut up turkey that's been in the fridge since last night. Just get that broken up a little bit so it can start blending in. And lastly, 12 ounces of wide egg noodles. Or use extra wide egg noodles, or use medium egg noodles. I guess if you don't want any noodles, that's okay too. Anyway, we'll just get everything stirred in as best we can at this point. That cold turkey dropped the temperature well below boiling, so we're gonna bring that back up to temperature and let all of this simmer away for about 10 minutes until the noodles are softened. All of that turkey is heated through. By then, the carrots will be perfectly soft and tender and will be just about ready to enjoy some of our soup. So I'll get this back up to that low boil or light simmer, whichever you want to call it, and we'll come back in a few minutes. And here we are. Our turkey soup is done and we're ready to serve some up and give it a taste. And I'll mention that if after cooking those egg noodles, it seems like your amount of liquid in here has gone down a little too much for your liking because it's soaked into those noodles, you can of course feel free to add in a little bit more of that turkey stock. As those noodles started cooking away, I did end up adding about 2 more cups to this pot for a total of 10 cups of that stock. I've probably got about another 2 cups of that stock left over, which I can save for later or whip up a quick batch of gravy for even more leftovers or do whatever I want with it. Anyway, this soup is looking and smelling amazing, so I think we need to get ourselves a bowl. Maybe just a tiny bit more fresh parsley just to make it extra pretty for my thumbnail photo. And we're ready to dig in. Tender carrots and celery and onions, some egg noodles, of course, that delicious roast turkey. And what I think is the star of the show is that ultra flavorful, beautiful, delicious homemade turkey stock. When I'm not making a video of this whole process, I can whip up this batch of turkey soup the day after Thanksgiving so quick. Mostly you're waiting around for that stock to cook. Everything else comes together so fast. And you can't really get turkey noodle soup, well, basically anywhere unless you make it yourself. So it really is a nice treat and it brings a little something different to the regular old chicken noodle soup you're probably used to. But anyway, I don't need to sell you on why you should make turkey soup out of your leftover Thanksgiving turkey and turkey carcass, because you searched for how to make turkey soup on YouTube. Anyway, try this recipe out. You're not going to be disappointed. And after making that whole Thanksgiving dinner, you've probably got almost all of these ingredients in the fridge already anyway. And as always, if you want to see the full written out recipe for this exact turkey soup that I made, I'll put a link to it in the video description below. In the meantime, be sure to like and subscribe and stay up to date with all our latest stuff, including lots of future cooking and food videos. Happy Thanksgiving, thanks for watching, and until next time, I'm John, and this is Great Lakes Country.